Okay, welcome to a fancy episode of the Pediatric Practice Management Awesome Cast. Today, instead of Brandon, though Brandon cannot be replaced, I have Dr. Nelson Branco from out in California. I'll introduce him in just one second. We are going to be talking about social media and the recent California chapter meeting that he ran, and we've got a few other topics. And Brandon isn't able to make it today, so we have a sort of a fill-in guest. And hopefully we will be able to plow through nonetheless. So, Dr. Branco, welcome.
Hey, Chip. How are you? Glad to be here.
I'm doing well.
Are we not supposed to talk about Brandon's secret mission to Croatia?
No, that would revealing his status as a CIA operative and being on the witness protection program would be definitely faulty on our part. So let's not do that.
So we don't want to talk about that while we're live or anything.
Exactly. Didn't the White House, I think just this week, the White House just outed the CIA chief in Afghanistan by accident. Whoops. Anyway, so why don't you tell us, well, I know, but tell everyone else who you are, what you do, and why you're here.
So I am a primary care pediatrician. I practice in Marin County, California. And I have recently stepped down as the chair of the CME committee for AAP California Chapter 1, and I'm an active member of the SOPM listserv and manage a pretty busy primary care practice here in Marin, among some other interesting things that I do.
All right. And we were just at your Chapter 1 meeting, I don't know, a month ago, 3 weeks ago. Tell us about it. What I know why it was special. I blogged about why it was special. But I want to hear from you.
So I think the reason I'm here is, we planned this meeting. We have a yearly meeting that's aimed at primary care pediatricians and really to get the word out to our chapter members and educate them. And this year, some of the topics that we presented that were requested and that we thought were important had to do with social media, blogging, how you can use the internet and different tools that are out there to enhance your practice, promote your practice. And so we had a few different talks. Some guy from Vermont came out and talked about your practice in the internet. We had a couple of local bloggers. We had 2 people in our chapter who are very active mommy bloggers, but also doc bloggers. Heidi Roman, who has a blog called My Two Hats, and Melissa Arca, who has a blog called Confessions of a Doctor Mom. And they did a couple of talks for us, and then we tried something new, which was to have a presentation by video and then with a Skype link for a Q&A. And we're lucky to have Wendy Sue Swanson, who is blogs as Seattle Mama Doc and runs the sort of digital media center. She has a new job, and I apologize, Wendy, I don't know if you'll ever see this, but I can't remember your exact title, but there's a new department at Seattle Children's which is really about engaging patients, and there are a handful of folks doing that kind of work. Wendy's one of them. And so she sent us a presentation, we projected it, and then we connected to her by Skype and did a little Q&A. I think that sparked your interest, and so you invited me to be here while Brandon's in Croatia.
Yeah, she is, just for the record, because I Googled it while you were talking, she's the Executive Director of Digital Health at Seattle Children's Hospital. That's her, I think, her new title, the one you're referring to. Yeah, I give, from time to time, I give a talk about social media, and the title of it is, the things you may not know. A lot of people give talks about, oh, this is why you need to be, this is how you set up a Facebook account, or this is why you need to use Twitter. And my talk usually focuses on sort of the darker side of things, like what do you need to worry about, or here's a simple way to get online if you are one of those people who really is afraid to do it. And I didn't realize your 2 local all-stars were going to be in the room. So usually when I ask a question like, okay, who here uses Twitter in their practice, I usually get no hands. Instead, I get these 2 hands from 2 doctors who've got like 5,000 followers each, and I realized pretty quickly that they should have been giving the talk and not me. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see their talks because their talks went at the same time as some of my other talks. So I can't speak to how good they were. I can only guess that based on the quality of their input in the talks they were in with me, they must have been awesome. And I really regret not getting to see them. I did get to see the Wendy Sue Swanson talk, though, and I thought it was really interesting enough that we invited her. We tried to figure out if she could come speak at our users conference, and it's too late in our cycle to really figure that out and make it happen. But for her to give that remote presentation, that was pretty courageous on your part, I thought.
Yeah, it was a new thing, and she coined the phrase. Didn't coin the phrase, but really was the first one to say that this was sort of it was a proof of concept. Can we really do this remotely? And here we are, on you and I on opposite sides of the country, chatting and broadcasting it to anybody who cares to watch. And so why not connect with someone who's got something to say? And it was interesting. I mean, it wasn't, as you know, without some technical glitches. As these things always go. Where we had stuff to work out right up until the time of the talk, but I think it went well, and it showed us that we can get different speakers. I mean, it's hard for us, doing CME, and this would be a very different kind of podcast, but talking about trying to set up educational conferences and meetings. You and I both have lots of experience with that. It's hard to get speakers who can come at that time, who, these folks often are traveling a lot, and so it was really, I thought, a good way to do it and to get a perspective that we wouldn't have gotten if we hadn't done that.
Yeah, so to be clear, for those, if it's not already, Wendy Sue Swanson did her entire presentation online. So just as if you're seeing me right now, it looked just like this on a huge screen. She used a really neat presentation tool called Prezi, and at the end of the day, we still have to have a presentation with some good content, and it has to be delivered well. All of that was great. In fact, that's really what I was after. But opening up these remote training opportunities to me is really fascinating. I could probably go give a talk every day of the week nationally, but it's just not practical. It's too much time traveling. And also, I mean, you know this because you've tried to sign up doctors. When you ask a doctor to come give a talk at your pediatric event, for an independent pediatrician to do that for less than $3,000 or $4,000 doesn't make sense, because that's what it's going to cost them to leave their office for 2 or 3 days, even if they're only giving a 1-hour talk, and then the travel and everything like that. Plus, it's not easy. So unless you're dangling, an event at to Lake Tahoe like you were, it's really hard to ask. That's why it's a lot easier for me to do these talks, and it's impossible. So I was really psyched to see your remote presentation. I thought it was great.
I think it went well, and we're hoping to do something like that again next year. We get the right speaker lined up, and again,
I'm in Vermont. I'm here. Sign me up.
But I thought you wanted to come to Lake Tahoe.
Well, there is that. We'll see. But it's funny. About a week before, maybe 2 weeks before, we saw Wendy Sue Swanson at your event. I was at another fundraising event where they were giving out Lifetime Achievement Awards, and one of the recipients was on vacation in Hawaii, and she couldn't make it there for her speech. And she did the same thing that Wendy Sue Swanson did, and it was as good as though she were there. And I will tell you, I've heard you sort of hedge your comments about it a little bit, and when I talked to Dr. Swanson, she seemed to be, she was like, well, it was hard to do. I can tell you, as someone in the audience, even with the imperfections, and just to give you an idea of what I mean by imperfections, okay, when she displayed things on her screen and it was being projected to this large audience, the edges of it were cut off, so little bits and pieces. But that was absolutely meaningless. Everyone in the room followed everything she had to say. And I'm hoping, in a way, that this opens up small pediatric events or smaller pediatric events to having higher quality speakers available. All right, because the two of us on this call, we know this. You're going to nod your head for me in a minute and confirm. But when we put together events, it's really, really hard to coordinate 3 or 4 expensive clinical people to get, to find who's available. And if instead I could say, listen, I just need you for 2 hours to sit in a quiet room. You can see patients all day. You can, you can do everything. I just need you for 2 hours or even 90 minutes. We'll set up the gear. You're all set. You can do your thing and then pop out. That means that we can get better people. It's cheaper. It means we can get people who are usually not available. There are a couple really well-known speakers who do not like to travel at all.
Yeah.
So you're courageous, and I applaud it. I haven't seen anyone else do it yet.
Well, I'll happily do it again, and even though I'm no longer the chair of the committee, I will step in and run the technical end and do the inviting. We've been trying to get Louis First from UVM, from your neck of the woods, for years, and he can never make it because he has another event. And so at some point, once we're ready for it, I'm going to bug him about doing a remote feed because he's a great speaker.
Have you seen him speak?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you mention it because he was the speaker at the fundraising event that I attended 2 weeks before. He's the MC for this child abuse prevention, local child abuse prevention group that I'm on the board of. Actually, I should say my wife's the president of the board of. And so that's pretty funny. And I will tell you, as a speaker, he is one of the best I've ever seen.
There you go. All right, well, put in a good word for me.
Well, you know what? I'm a vendor, so you don't want to mention that you know me until after you get the ink to dry.
Got it. Hey, so just to for those in our audience who may not be setting up CME meetings, let me propose this. I mean, what about being able to give talks at your hospital at a prenatal class, or being able to connect with patients to talk about doing a sleep class, right? I mean, in our office, we have a few classes that we run for our patients on a monthly basis. So every month we do infant sleep class, we do a picky toddler nutrition class, we do postpartum depression class, and wouldn't it be great, for these new moms who may want to come to be able to hook up on a Google chat, a Google Hangout like we are now, or a Skype, or some other connection, and hear the talk without having to drag their toddler or infant down to the office to hear it.
I think that's an amazing idea.
Yeah, and it's easy to do.
Right? You record it like you and I are recording now. You record it right once, and you can then share that on your webpage or share snippets of it.
Right. That's a good point. Can I ask you about your talk, which because I was running in and out doing tech at our meeting, what I'm really curious about and what I wanted to hear from your talk, and I just missed, was talking about Yelp and doctor review sites.
Yeah,
What's your take on that? Because that was one of the things that when we invited you, when you invite Chip to give a talk, he gives you this whole menu of options of different talks he can give, everything from the internet to evaluating your practice to heavy metal of the 80s to
my specialty.
Right. I mean, and we didn't have time for that one, but we'll cover that one next year. But one of the reasons we picked the internet talk was because some folks in our chapter had some Yelp issues. And so what's your take? What's your advice?
All right, so it's interesting. It's a good question to ask. And the first thing I'll tell you is every time I give a talk to a group of people, even if my subject is in this box here, what ends up getting delivered is always a subset of that box based on the feedback that I get from the audience. And there were 2 topics that for my talk that really came out, and one of them was this review site, and or this review concept. What do we do? And the other one was relating to the fact that about half the people in the room were not on at all, including a couple of the young physicians, and they couldn't see the return. And I'll talk to you about that in a second. So when it comes to reviews, there are a couple of truisms that I try to pass along to people. And one of them is that I deliberately do not stand up in front of the audience and say, here's what you do about a bad Yelp review, especially because the moment I write that and I put that in a slide, the rules are going to change. Yelp is going to do something different. There's going to be some new process, and so I don't want to aim at a moving target. I just want to give some larger rules that people should be able to apply in most circumstances. So the first thing I like to tell people, if you get a bad review on any site, all right, the first thing to not do is respond. All right, and if what I tell physicians all the time is, look, it's very personal. When someone says something negative about you or the way you handled a patient, it's very personal. It's very difficult to not react to it. And if more of my clients simply followed the next couple items, their online presences would be much easier to maintain, or they'd have fewer problems. So rule number one is, do not react to a negative comment online yourself. You need to have someone on your staff do it, or someone who is a professional at it, or someone you engage to do this. When you respond directly to criticism, it is almost humanly impossible, unless you're Gandhi, to turn the other cheek and respond appropriately. Should you need to respond, there are a couple sort of categories or there really, in my opinion, only two responses that are at all appropriate ever to an online negative review. The first one is in the event that you have a review that is in fact libelous. All right. If somebody says something to you that is about you that is factually not true, and we just had this actually. I gave this example just before I visited with your practice or visited your group. I had a practice call me from down south who ran into a circumstance where one of her patients had gone on Facebook to say that a couple of kids had died in her care. Okay, something totally demonstrably false. When something like that occurs, you need to simply call your attorney ASAP and do whatever the attorney tells you to do. All right? I presume you have a good attorney, but there are very specific rules and laws involving falsehoods and libel and so forth, and slander. Slander's spoken, but libel's written. And so you really want to follow that. And all right, so that's rule number one. And rule number 1.1, if you get a review about yourself that doesn't ring true, if you think there's something going on, I also do recommend that you follow the process that most sites put into place to respond to reviews. That is not to respond directly, but to write back to Yelp and say, hey, you know what, I question the validity of this review. I don't think this person is a patient, or I think this patient's really upset about the fact that we demanded that they pay their bill, which has been overdue for a long time. You can't do that about all of them. You can only do about that about the ones that are inappropriate. But follow their rules. Don't try to do something sneaky and log in under a pseudonym. Don't do something silly and try to out that person. You're a pediatric practice. You don't have the skill set or the time to do something like that. So then, okay, so that's one set of reactions. You've had a bad review. If you need to respond, if there's a legal response required, take care of it that way. Yep. Sorry. Go ahead.
How about the idea that, and I've seen practices do this, and I think I may even have done it myself once, which is simply to respond, I'm sorry you had that experience. Please call our office. We'd be happy to help.
That's response number 2. That's the only other thing. All right. I said this in the class. Apologize. 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 Period. There's no other reaction. In fact, and what I'd like people to say is this: I'm sorry that you had that experience. It is certainly not our wish to ever have someone feel as though they were treated that way. You got to be, you want to be a little careful here. You don't want to say, "I'm sorry that you were treated that way." What you can say is, I'm sorry that you felt you were treated that way. And then what you could say is, depending on the nature of the complaint or whatever the case may be, I mean, here's the thing. You're going to read a complaint, and you're going to say to yourself, oh, that really did happen, and I really do need to apologize. Or you're gonna look at it and say, this person's a fruitcake, and that's not someone I want back in my practice. So when that happens in the secondary circumstance, you say, I'm sorry that you had that experience. We would never want one of our patients to feel that way. That the experience that you had and the way you feel about it is not our standard of care. I invite you to find a new practice where you may be comfortable. We will gladly transfer all of your charts and let's do so as soon as possible. Basically, you are in public inviting them to go somewhere else, but you're doing it after apologizing and making clear, hey, this is not what it's what you felt wasn't acceptable to us either, but that's why you need to go somewhere else. And just like, I don't know if you've ever logged into Yelp and looked up like one of your favorite restaurants, and you see and they've got some negative reviews, and you look and you're like, that can't be true. I know that waitress. She would never treat someone like that, and there's no way that they served something cold or it had a bitter taste. You know that those people are just crazy. If you see a response from the vendor basically saying, hey, we're really sorry about that. That's not our intent. We're going to look into this, and thanks for letting us know. Right there, you know who the lunatic is.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, the analogy is when you make an error, right? Step number one is to apologize for the error, and this is not your error in this case, or in a lot of these cases. But you apologize, and then you let people know that we're going to do everything we can to make sure this never happens again. And I think it's a similar concept. People say, and it certainly is borne out, that the only folks who post on Yelp are either people who are angry at you for one reason or another, often related to owing you money, or your best friends. And it certainly has been, I've seen that be true in the case of my favorite restaurants and local establishments and my own practice. Our very first Yelp review was a friend of mine who posted that. I read the review and I thought, wow, what a nice review, and didn't put it together for days that it was someone I knew.
Well, Mom, what are you doing on Yelp?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
If I can add, and maybe you'll get into this, but one thing that I found really useful as the managing partner of my practice, we have 7 doctors, a couple of nurse practitioners, and I got on Yelp and looked up all of our individual names, looked up our practice names, both locations, and linked them all together, because the last thing you want is for
a single bad review to be hanging out there on your name. Right.
Exactly. You want everybody's good reviews and bad reviews to hang together and balance each other out. And even though I think as doctors we may be slow to jump in and engage with this kind of stuff, it does make sense to behave like a business owner and go in and manage your presence.
Absolutely. One of that's a great tip. And I also explain to people in the room, look, you need to go get your Facebook page now, even if you don't want to do Facebook, and you need to go get your Google Plus page, because they've already been created. They're sitting there waiting for you. People are checking into your business whether you like it or not. And I've never sneezed in all these times. I've done my podcast. I've never sneezed. And there it was. I was like, oh, here it comes. Anyway. So you're 100% correct. For these major sites, you need to go in and act like a business owner. In fact, I'm going to steal that and say it just that way. And gather your stuff together. The other thing I tell people is ask your patients for reviews. Yeah. And you don't have to simply say, oh, if you were happy today, I want you to go on Yelp and write a review. You can say, go to these places and put reviews in, good or bad, for us, because we want your feedback. If there's something we can do for you today, let me know. And a lot of practices are afraid to get a review and are afraid to ask for their patients for stuff, and that's silly. Every other business they work with asks right now, and You know, we're big. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah.
This is a good segue because you mentioned how you went into your Yelp account and you amalgamated your various different accounts, you know, the individual physicians, your locations, you put them into one, acted like a business owner. Um, I'm adding to that, like you need to act like a business owner and get yourself on Facebook because someone already has an account for you. You go Google yourself. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And that led to what I thought was to me and to you, I'm sure this is really obvious, but maybe to someone listening out there, it's not. I had a young physician in the room the first time I taught the class for you guys say, you know what, I just don't want to get on Facebook because it's one more thing I have to worry about every day. I don't
Right.
have an extra 30 minutes. I don't have an extra hour. I don't want to worry about it. And I
Yeah.
pointed out that this problem has largely been solved. If you start a Facebook, if you get on your Facebook and you feel like you should, obligated to post some fresh content, you do not have to write something every day or every week. That's why we are pediatricians. You can just hook up to 2 or 3 sources and maybe once a year you contribute something. Great,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Can I?
And that, once I told people about We Are Pediatricians, pardon me, and one or two of the practices in the room said, "Oh yeah, we use it all the time." Then I could see like the visible relief on the talks, like, oh. So I said, look, in the time that we've been talking, and certainly in less time that you and I have been talking today, you could have your full Facebook website set up,
Right.
ready to go, working, and you're just putting your address and your hours and who you are, and then you're putting a news feed that points at We Are Pediatricians and a few other sites so that your patients who are looking for you find you and find you with appropriate material. So I don't know if that's it. I mean, you must use We Are Pediatricians, I assume.
So I'll tell you what I do and what I'm hoping to do now that I'm not planning those meetings anymore,
Yep.
and I'll have more time. Our practice actually on our website, we have what's called a blog that was set up by the company that did our website, and that blog we use as really a news page. We post when there are any changes in the practice. You know, we're closed on Memorial Day, but the after-hours clinic is open. Interesting cases in the news. Anytime one of our folks ends up in the news, if I'm quoted in a vaccine article or my nurse practitioner is quoted in an article, that gets on there. And that blog does 3 things. Anyone who has signed up, they click a button, they enter their email address, and they get an email that says, Tamalpais Pediatrics has posted something on their blog, and tomorrow there's going to be a sleep class. Next week there's going to be a picky toddler nutrition class. That blog also automatically sends that to our Facebook page and to our Twitter account. And so I put one thing up, and it populates all 3. And that, like I said, it's
How much work is it?
Oh, it's you can ask your friends who use this website. You get on. It takes 5 minutes to put in a blog entry. I hit go live. It goes on our website right away, and then I do nothing else. It just shows up on our Facebook page. It just goes out on our Twitter, and it comes out as a link, so that on our Facebook page, when they click that link, they're taken to our website, and so they not only then see the blog, but then they have access to all the other information and stuff on our website. What I really want to do going forward, because it's sort of the way I use email versus Facebook versus Twitter, is that I'd like the blog to continue to populate the news and the information about my practice across all 3. But I'm going to start sharing more things from We Are Pediatricians and from the AAP and these interesting stories from Seattle Mama Doc. I mean, I have in the past on our blog, when Wendy Sue writes something and I happen to have 5 minutes, I'll write a blog post and said, hey, I just saw this great blog post I thought you might be interested in. But for me, that's more of a Facebook thing, right? Something that people will see, that they'll share, that they'll send around. The advantage becomes, right now on our Facebook page for our practice, we have a few hundred folks. A good portion of them are friends of mine. Many of them are actually not patients in our practice. But as you share things on Facebook, and then they get shared by the people who are following your page, it gets more visibility for your page, and then more of my patients will connect to me on Facebook. It's been invaluable, the blog and the email thing. In the wintertime, when we do our flu shot clinics, every week there's a blog post. This is the flu shot clinic this week is in the Greenbrae office instead of the Novato office from this hour to this hour. Walk in. I can give as many details as I want, and then throughout the year we have signs in all the rooms that talk about the email, blog, the Facebook, the Twitter. It has QR codes that nobody really knows how to use, and then I encourage people to sign up at our prenatal visits. I encourage people to sign up because it's such an efficient way to get the word out. And compared to the old days of sending out a letter to every one of our patients, or doing the call 'em all, recording a message that gets called and left on voicemails on home phones that don't get checked for a week. It's way more efficient, and I think there's a lot of potential. I'm not going to pretend to be the king of social media in pediatrics, but I do intend to use it more that way. And there's lots out there that you just hit share and it's done. It takes you two minutes.
Well, and nowadays, the majority of moms who come into your office, they have one of these. And the phone, when you are sending out letters, or you're doing you're not doing robocalls, your nurses are calling, you have to wake up in the morning and say, okay, we're going to do a recall, someone has to write the letter has to get printed and mailed, we have to send it out, they'll get their message in a couple of days, so you have to actually know when your flu clinic is going to be 2 weeks in advance. And then even then, you're like, I just spent all this money, and 2/3 of the letters never got read. Whereas with social media, you can wake up in the morning and say, hey, you know what? I just found 200 doses in the basement fridge. Let me get rid of them.
Well, how many people have posted on the SOCM listserv that, I had a cancellation, 3 cancellations this afternoon. I posted it on my Facebook page, and they filled up within 20 minutes. There was some interesting statistics that I just discovered. Some from Wendy Sue's talk that I sort of pulled from the conference, but also that I just looked up. 3/4 of moms in the U.S. have visited Facebook in the last month. The 3/4 of moms, right? I mean, that's our demographic. And if you look at the demographics of Facebook, Facebook is changing. From 2011 to 2014, 3 million teenagers left Facebook, canceled their Facebook account. I'm out. In the same time period, 10.8 million adults, 25 to 34, joined Facebook. And so,
that's your bread and butter right there.
Here in Marin, we have, older parents, 25 to 34. That is our sweet spot. Right. For parents. And so this is not an ad for Facebook, but it's such a powerful, effective tool for getting the word out. You can't ignore it. The funny thing, and I don't know if you want to segue, but I'd love to segue into sort of talking about teenagers and Facebook for a second, because that statistic didn't really surprise me. One of my partners about a year ago was talking to a teen about social media and asked her, are you on Facebook? And the teen said, oh, I use Facebook to talk to my grandma. Right, yeah. For my friends, I use Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, Tumblr, and I think as pediatricians, it may not feel native to us. It may not feel like something we like to do, but you know what? Long after my kids outgrew cartoons on Saturday morning, well, they still watch cartoons, different kind, but I know about Doc McStuffins. I have no kids in my house who watch Doc McStuffins, you got to stay up on this stuff because it is what you're encountering every day. And in the same way that you have to know who these cartoon characters are, I challenge any pediatrician to not hum a few bars of the Frozen song. I'll bet you could too, Chip. You can do that.
No, actually, somehow we've avoided the Frozen, all of Frozen. I haven't seen it, haven't been to it, but everything Pixar pre-Frozen.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Chip? Your kids are right on the cusp. You have two boys who are sort of preteen. When they start dating, they're gonna watch Frozen, and you're gonna hear it. Yeah.
Could be.
Hey,
I've never seen a Pixar movie I haven't liked, so I can't complain.
Okay. That aside, you have to know about Instagram. You have to know what how Instagram works and what kids are doing on Instagram. You have to know what Snapchat is, and you have to realize what the issues are with Snapchat. And for those who don't know, Snapchat gives you a message that only lasts for a few seconds after you read it, or minutes. I don't even know how long. But the problem is that kids send these messages that are that they think will disappear and be gone forever. But other kids will take screenshots and then share them. You have to know what Tumblr is. You have to know what Ask.fm or sorry, there's another website. Can't think of the name of that. Is a real site for cyberbullying. And so again, even though we may not use them, we may not feel comfortable there, you have to know this stuff because you have to talk to your patients about it. This is part of anticipatory guidance.
Right, and 40, 50 years ago, I'm sure the doctors were complaining that they weren't going to have to, they didn't want to have to learn how to watch TV. They didn't want, or I mean, who knows whatever newfangled thing was coming along. But if you want to stay connected to your teens, I agree. You need to know and understand this stuff. And in the end, one of the things that I like to remind people is that it's really not as hard as you think. Otherwise, teenagers couldn't and wouldn't do it.
That is true.
Yeah. If you got through med school, you can handle learning how to communicate on Facebook and what Snapchat is.
Hey, my mom is on Facebook. You'll see her. And my mom, I'm proud to say, got on Facebook after she learned to use a computer, taking a computer class at a local community college a couple of years ago. In her, I'll just say, late 60s, with 4 years of formal education in Portugal. My mom never went to school here in the United States, and she can get on Facebook and like and share and do all that stuff. If she can do it, if my 13-year-old daughter can be an Instagram ninja, you can do it too. It's not that hard.
My mom shows up on Facebook and is famous for appearing on all of our siblings' pages. It's just like, oh, you are so beautiful. That's okay. We're like, oh, Mom, please don't post. And then she'll always. It's like she always makes some huge typo in her messages. And this is someone who, she used to proofread all my papers in high school and everything. It's like, Mom, did you look at what you typed before you hit send? And so they'll be like, Chipper, we are so proud of you, and then like XPL, and then she...
Chip, that explains a lot. Yeah. I think I have a new insight now.
Yeah, well, that's where I'm headed as I get older. I do think it was interesting seeing, though it was interesting in the instance out in California. You guys are clearly going to be ahead of most of the curve when it comes to some of the social media stuff, just by the nature of where you live. But I found it interesting that it was some of the older physicians where you are who were more in tune to what's happening, and it was some of the younger physicians. This isn't universally true at all, but it was some of the younger physicians who were objecting to the use of social media as being imposing, an imposition on their time. I thought that was I was surprised by that. I'm up in front of a room and I've got to sort of zero in on someone without knowing anything about their background and say, so what does your Facebook page look like to the the guy who's 10 years younger than I am, and he's like, we don't do Facebook. I'm like, oh, you screwed me up. So I don't, I don't know if there's any grand pattern there if we're going to start seeing that same thing out here. But age should not be a barrier. Let's say that.
That's a tough one to explain. I mean, I wonder if it has something to do with, early in your practice, just feeling overwhelmed by everything.
Certainly the case for some of those individuals. We're also talking about an extremely small sample size on my part.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I've seen it, even here, people that practice locally, and I'm surprised that they don't have any kind of presence on Facebook. If for no other reason than, that's how you reach out to patients. I mean, that's what they expect. Right. You've talked before about your website, and I think you and Brandon had a podcast where you had a web designer talking about your practice website, and I think you guys were spot on. People expect you to have a professional-looking website with some actual content and information, and if you don't have it,
I ask people, you're a patient. When you want to go find something out about your doctor, what do? You go to Google, you type it in. Oh, they've got a Facebook page. Let me read it. Oh, they've got a website. You need to think like a patient. And it's odd that people don't always do that.
Well, and I also, I have to say, I am one of these folks who does much of what I need to do late at night online. I pay my bills online. I schedule my appointments online. And when I can't do something online, and I have to, because when do I have time during the day? I'm running from patient to patient, like everybody else who's listening to this podcast or watching the podcast. At lunchtime, I try to sneak it in, or on my day off. Thank goodness I have a day off that I can get all this stuff done. Yeah. So anything I can do online after the kids are in bed is golden. And
hey, I had to schedule a plumber to visit, and I called someone today because I broke a sink. It's a long story, and I called the first plumber, the plumber we've used forever, and they can't see us for 2 weeks. So then I went online and I was like, oh, look, I can fill out this little thing. And the guy called me on my cell phone 10 minutes later, and we took care of it. It was someone else. I'm like, I know which plumber I'm going to be using for now. It's 10 times more convenient, and I can do it from this.
Yeah.
I can be driving somewhere. I could hand one of my kids my phone, and I can say, go online and schedule, do whatever.
Yeah.
So,
all
right. So I'm going to ask you. I'm going to corner you though. So you said something I think that's pretty cool and helpful for some people listening.
Me?
Yeah. So ready? Here it is. If you had to recommend 4 or 5 places a pediatrician should be familiar with in order to converse well with teens, where would they be? Whether it's a pop culture reference or a website or anything like that. What are the things that you've learned about that have helped you to communicate or engage your teams the best?
I think you have to know about the social media sites. You have to know about Facebook, about Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, the Ask.fm, I think, is the name of the website, which is one that has been an issue in the schools locally. I give you what you should do, and what everyone should do is you should marry a school counselor. That's what my wife has been she's a LCSW and has a public health degree and has been a school counselor in high schools around the Bay Area for the last 10 years. She's now at the middle school, and so she keeps me up to date on all this stuff because she's dealing with it every day. And so I have a little bit of an unfair advantage, but on the other hand, the information is out there about what kids are doing and what they're interested in. But those websites, you need to know how they work. You need to know that Instagram is for pictures with comments, and that the comments can get out of control. And everybody has their spiel. I really break it down. I talk to kids about it. I like to know what they're doing. But for the middle school kids especially, I try to keep it simple because we don't have a whole lot of time. I don't really see your Instagram feed. But I tell kids what lots of other people tell them, which is that you never type anything to anyone that you wouldn't say to them live. You never send a message to anyone, whether it's email, texting, or on social media, that you wouldn't want your parents to read. And you never put anything online that you wouldn't want your grandma to see.
Yep.
And those 3 simple rules, which I have seen many adults break, I think go a long way to keeping kids safe. And then you can get into whether parents know what their kids are doing online and how much time they're spending. During the conference, I actually found an app that I started using that I have found really fascinating, and I'm sure there are other apps that do the same thing. For Android, I asked a kid to download it for iPhone, and he couldn't find it in the for iPhone, but it's called Frequency, and it's an app that keeps track of how many minutes you spend in each app on your phone, and it sorts it by day, by week, by month, and so I can go onto my phone right now, and I can see that I've already, after being awake for 2 hours, spent 20 minutes on email, 15 minutes on Facebook. And I think that that is so illuminating for kids who, they all say the same thing. How much time do you spend on your phone on social media, on Instagram or Facebook or texting? And they go, oh, not very long.
Yeah,
and
5 minutes, 10 minutes. Yeah, my kids do the same thing.
Yeah. And I'll bet if they knew, they would be surprised. And I think it would be fascinating to know. I actually spent an hour of my day texting.
Right.
Which is, and I have to say, I don't give kids a hard time for texting. There's a lot of drama around it because it can be so isolating when you're in a group and everybody is staring at their phones, sending messages to other people. But on the other hand, we all need to connect and separate from our parents and connect with our friends when we're teenagers. We know that's developmentally appropriate. Texting is just a new tool. I mean, we had phone, we had Pony Express, we had bicycles, they have cars. It's just a different way of doing it. So
I agree entirely. There's nothing special about today's teenagers.
No.
And thank God I didn't have smartphones when I was a kid.
Let's not even get into that. That Atari 2600 was bad enough.
Yeah, well, the thing is, back when we were kids, I mean, I'm sure you were the same way. I circumvented every rule we could find, and parents today, I think, are much more in control of what their kids are up to, even though they fail all the time. I mean, I'm sure it was like the same. It was the same for you when I was a kid. My mom would say, "Go ride your bike and don't come back until dinner,"
right.
And we might be gone for 6 or 8 hours. Yeah. And if we'd had smartphones as opposed to, magnifying glasses and wrist rockets and stuff, I mean, the trouble we would have gotten into was infinite.
One of the other things that I talk to parents about, and this, my daughter's 13, and on Instagram, I have an Instagram account. I don't do much with it except every so often I look and see what she's posting, and she posts as many pictures as we've said that she can post per day, and she doesn't post pictures of her friends without their permission because we've made it pretty clear that those are the rules. But I also am connected to her friends, and so not only do I see her pictures and the comments that her friends have made, and this is, was one of the things that we set out there, is that I want your friends to allow me to see their pictures with their permission, and so I get to keep an eye on what her friends are up to and into and getting into, and that will probably change as they get into high school and they start blocking me. Yep. But for right now, I think it's really useful, and I actually tell parents a lot. If you can be the trusted adult to watch over your nephew or niece on social media and to kind of alert their parents that they should ask about it, I think that it's really useful and helpful. You may not want your parents to be on your Facebook account, but it might be okay to have your uncle across the country be on your Facebook account if he doesn't, post pictures of you in the bathtub.
Yeah, yeah. I know that I set up the email for both of my sons, so any message that they get in their inboxes, I get a copy of it.
Yeah,
so,
and I did the same for my daughter, but do they actually use email? It's all about texting.
Yeah, and I don't know about. I should know, but my kids don't text yet. So, but when that happens,
Yeah.
We've already seen it be a problem in our high school, and I'm always aghast when I'm somewhere and I look over and there's some sixth grader who's at an event with us who's got a iPhone 5 texting away.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I think I would do the same thing. I know that last year one of our sons was in a school musical. He's not on Facebook or anything like that. And my wife had friended a couple of the kids, just all in all earnestness.
Yeah.
And she went and checked her feed, and there's some pictures of her kid, and there were these conversations.
Yeah.
And on one hand, it's absolutely horrifying. But on the other hand, I think back and I'm like, when I was 13, I said and did much, much worse. And I'm okay, one assumes, or at least that's my veneer. You're okay. And I think you have to find that healthy zone in the middle, like you're talking about, to remember this is developmentally normal. This is what it's you actually who needs to develop as a parent.
Yeah.
And
like anything else, you have to set up some rules around it and figure out how you're going to limit it appropriately and allow them. It's a tool like anything else. Another thing, I'll kind of add another answer to your question and maybe segue back to something we talked about earlier, which is how are you supposed to know what all these different sites are and what kids are up to? And one way to know is to follow. We are pediatricians, to follow these different bloggers, right? And one of the interesting things that I just discovered as I was kind of Googling around this morning is that 1 in 3 bloggers or actually no, I apologize. This didn't cut. This came from Wendy Sue's talk. 1 in 3 bloggers online right now are moms, and so every third blogger is a mom. And 52% of bloggers are parents with kids who are less than 18. And so, if you follow a couple of these Facebook pages like We Are Pediatricians, I know here in California, I'm really trying to push for our chapter our chapter Facebook page to become a resource for folks who have a practice who want to share interesting articles. And you will find articles about social media in teens. You'll find articles about bullying. You'll find articles about what it's like to be sleep deprived and have a newborn. And for me, I read these articles and I always kind of save them for later and hope to put them up on the Facebook page. But that's an easy way to do it. Is you follow a couple of blogs, you read a few sentences. If it's interesting, you read the whole thing to make sure there isn't something totally ridiculous that you wouldn't want associated with your practice. But rarely, there really is. Usually, they're reasonable things that you can post and share and get the word out, and also stay up on what's happening out there in the blogosphere, as they say.
Right. It strikes me also that since not everybody can marry a school counselor, a very easy thing to do for a pediatrician would be to pick up the phone and call your local middle school and say, hey, tell me the top 3 things that are happening in the school right now that I need to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
And most of those folks would love to give you that feedback.
Yeah, I have to say, one of the things that I think we sometimes underestimate is the authority of just calling to say, hey, I'm a pediatrician. People love talking to pediatricians.
I totally agree.
And if you walk in with some humility and saying, I want you to tell me what your issues are, then you will get an earful, and you'll get some agenda, but mostly you'll just get lots of information. Call your local school nurse, call your school counselors, ask if they have a meeting. School counselors often will all get together, and you can talk to a bunch of them at once, and that kind of networking, I think, makes you a more valuable community member and a better pediatrician.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's I'm always surprised that it doesn't happen more often. But we all don't have 100% free time.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered a lot today, and I really do appreciate the input. This has been good. I didn't. I have to tell you, even though this is using effectively a social media methodology, I didn't expect to spend as much time on this particular topic over a series of podcasts. But it's clearly, really, in my opinion, become the topic in pediatrics right now. So your input has been great, and I appreciate that.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me, Chip, and I hope Brandon makes it back safely.
I'm sure he will after he rescues those hostages. Oh, you're right. Anyway. All right. I will talk to you soon. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Chip. Take care.